Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like your peace was being stolen one reaction at a time? You wake up already tense. Someone says one thing, and suddenly your whole mood shifts. You're chasing calm, but everything keeps pulling you out of it. That's not living, that's surviving chaos on repeat. But here's the truth. The moment you realize you don't have to respond to everything, you begin to reclaim your power. You start remembering that. Silence is an answer, patience is a defense, and peace is not something others can give you. It's something you decide to keep. There are 3 simple questions that can put you back in control. And I promise if you start asking them, really asking them, you'll stop living as a reactor and start living as a responder. The first question is this mine to carry? Because most of what's breaking you was never yours to fix. People will hand you their anger, their fear, their pressure, and you'll mistake it for responsibility. But wisdom says you can love someone without absorbing their storm. When you stop carrying what isn't yours, you create space to breathe again. To think clearly, to choose peace on purpose. The second question is, what is this teaching me about me? Because life isn't happening to you. It's happening through you. Every conflict, every delay, every disappointment, it's feedback for your soul. When you stop blaming and start learning, pain becomes your teacher instead of your captor. Maybe that frustration is teaching you patience. Maybe that silence is teaching you strength. Maybe that loss is showing you how much you depended on something temporary. Detachment isn't coldness, it's clarity. It's learning to see the lesson without losing your peace in the process. And the third question is, who do I want to be right now? Because that's the question that gives you your power back. You can't always control the outcome, but you can always control your output. You decide if you'll respond with grace or with fear, with ego or with peace. Every reaction writes a small part of who you become. So when tension rises, when words sting, when emotions flare, pause, ask, who do I want to be right now? And then act like that person already exists inside you. You see, control isn't about manipulating the outside world. It's about mastering your inner one. It's about being unmoved in the storm because you've learned that peace is not a circumstance, it's a stance. You'll start to realize the less you cling, the more you receive, the less you chase, the more you attract, the less you argue, the more you understand. Every time you choose peace over reaction, you're telling your spirit, I'm not ruled by emotion, I'm led by wisdom. And that's how you rise, that's how you take back control, not by fighting harder, but by standing softer. Because real strength is not loud, it's quiet, it's steady, it's the power to smile when the world expects you to break. Control doesn't come from holding tighter. It comes from knowing when to release what was never yours to manage. The human instinct is to grip, to hold on to people, plans, and outcomes as if our security depends on them. But the harder we grip, the more life seems to slip through our fingers. That's because control rooted in fear is never real control. It's desperation disguised as discipline. The need to manage everything around us often stems from a deeper anxiety within us. A fear that if we let go, everything will fall apart. Yet what if letting go isn't losing? What if it's the only way to find peace again? When you try to control everything, you step into a role that was never yours. You start managing people's emotions, anticipating every possible outcome, and carrying the burden of what others think or feel. But here's the quiet truth. You cannot hold peace and control at the same time. One must be released for the other to exist. The tighter you hold to how things should be, the further you drift from accepting how things truly are. And in that resistance, you lose your grounding. You lose the calm that comes from trusting life to unfold as it needs to. Releasing control isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It means you've matured beyond needing everything to go your way. You've learned that life doesn't bend to your expectations, it responds to your alignment. When you let go, you stop trying to play every instrument in the orchestra and start listening for the rhythm that's already playing. You begin to trust that what's meant for you will never need to be forced, and what's not meant for you will never stay no matter how tightly you hold it. That's divine order, not chaos, not loss, but sacred balance. Letting go is an act of faith, not defeat. It says, I trust that I am being guided, even when I don't understand the path. It's surrender with confidence, not with fear. And when you finally loosen your grip on what was never yours, people, outcomes, perceptions, you discover something powerful. You never needed control to have peace. You needed peace to stop chasing control. In that stillness, you find freedom. Not the kind that comes from managing everything, but the kind that comes from knowing you no longer have to. Emotional detachment isn't apathy, it's the maturity to stay peaceful while everything around you shifts. There's a difference between feeling deeply and being ruled by those feelings. Detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop carrying what doesn't belong to you. It's the art of staying connected to your emotions without being consumed by them. Life will always bring uncertainty, disappointment, and chaos. The goal isn't to escape those things, but to meet them with calm awareness instead of emotional turbulence. Detachment teaches you to observe instead of absorb, to witness instead of react. It's not about building walls. It's about learning to stand still in a storm without losing your balance. When you're emotionally attached to outcomes, your peace becomes conditional. You're calm when things go your way, but the moment they don't, you unravel. You start equating your worth with results, people's approval, or the fulfillment of your expectations. That's when you lose yourself. Emotional detachment breaks that pattern. It returns your power to where it belongs. Within, it allows you to say, I can care deeply without losing myself in the process. It reminds you that your emotions are indicators, not dictators. They can inform your choices, but they don't have to control your identity or direction. True detachment isn't coldness, it's clarity. It's the awareness that peace is your natural state, and nothing outside of you should have the power to disturb it. It's understanding that you can love someone and still let them walk their path. You can want success without being crushed by delay. You can face rejection and still know your value hasn't changed. That level of emotional steadiness doesn't come from indifference. It comes from trust. Trust that what's meant for you will align and what isn't will fall away without taking your peace with it. When you practice detachment, you stop reacting to every ripple and start responding to the tide. You begin to understand that control over emotion isn't suppression, it's self-leadership. You learn that presence is power and that peace is not found by running from emotion, but by sitting with it and choosing wisdom over reaction. That is the quiet strength of emotional detachment. Not the absence of feeling, but the mastery of it. The more you try to control others, the more you lose control of yourself. Control over people is an illusion born from fear, fear of being disappointed, abandoned, or unseen. When you start trying to direct how others think, feel, or act, you step outside the boundaries of your own peace and into a space that was never meant for you. You trade authenticity for anxiety, trying to manage outcomes that were never yours to own. And in the process, you lose the very thing you were trying to protect, your inner stability. Real control doesn't come from shaping others. It comes from mastering your own responses to them. Every time you attempt to control another person, you're really trying to soothe a part of yourself that doesn't trust life to work out. You want predictability, you want safety, you want to guarantee that you won't be hurt, but that kind of safety doesn't exist. People are unpredictable, circumstances shift, and the more you demand certainty, the more exhausted you become. The truth is, control is not protection. It's a cage. It traps you in constant tension, making you dependent on how others behave just to feel okay. You start living reactively, measuring your peace by how well others perform according to your expectations. Freedom begins when you let go of that illusion, when you realize that others are not extensions of your will, but individuals with their own paths, choices, and timing. You can guide, influence, or inspire, but the moment you try to control, you disconnect from love and step into fear. Love flows freely, control restricts. Love trusts the process. Control manipulates the outcome. When you stop trying to control others, you rediscover your own power. The power to stay calm when others aren't, to remain centered when others shift, to respond with grace instead of pressure. You cannot lead what you're trying to dominate, and you cannot connect with what you're trying to control. Real strength is the ability to release others to their own journey while remaining rooted in yours. It's saying, I don't need you to change for me to stay at peace. That's not detachment from love. It's detachment from fear. And that's where true control is found, not in managing others, but in mastering yourself. Clarity begins when noise ends. Silence often gives you more answers than confrontation ever could. In a world that glorifies constant reaction, noise has become our comfort zone. We rush to explain, defend, prove, and fix, thinking that talking or acting faster will bring understanding. But true clarity doesn't come from noise. It comes from stillness. Silence is not emptiness. It's the space where truth finally has room to speak. When you stop reacting to every word, every judgment, every misunderstanding, you start hearing the subtle voice of wisdom that only rises in calm It's in that quiet pause between what happens and how you respond that peace begins to shape your perception. Most people are not lost because of confusion. They're lost because they never stop long enough to listen. Silence is uncomfortable because it exposes what's within. It makes you face the thoughts you've been avoiding and the emotions you've been suppressing. But that's exactly where clarity hides. In the still moments you're tempted to skip, the more noise you create around your confusion, the further you drift from the answer that's already waiting for you. Clarity doesn't compete for attention. It waits for silence. And the truth is, not every situation deserves your voice. Some moments call for stillness because silence itself is the boundary that preserves your peace. When you choose silence over confrontation, you're not surrendering, you're elevating, you're saying, my energy is too valuable to be wasted on noise. You begin to recognize that not every misunderstanding needs correction, not every attack needs defense, and not every conflict needs resolution on your terms. Some things fall apart because they're not meant to continue. Others resolve themselves the moment you stop fueling them with reaction. Silence teaches you patience, perspective, and restraint. The ability to stand in truth without shouting it. Clarity born from silence is pure because it's unfiltered by emotion or ego. It's the kind that comes from alignment, not argument. When you sit in quiet reflection, your mind organizes chaos, your heart finds rhythm, and your spirit returns to balance. You begin to see what really matters and what was only noise pretending to be urgent. Silence doesn't mean doing nothing. It means trusting that peace has its own way of revealing truth. When you finally stop trying to force it, you don't regain control by fixing everything. You regain it by asking better questions. Most people spend their energy trying to repair what's broken around them instead of understanding what's happening within them. The instinct to fix comes from fear, the fear of uncertainty, the discomfort of not knowing, the anxiety of things being out of order. But the truth is, control isn't found in doing more. It's found in seeing deeper. Every situation you face carries a lesson, but you can't hear that lesson if you're too busy forcing a solution. Fixing is often about changing the external, while wisdom begins by questioning the internal. When you pause and ask the right questions, you shift from reacting to reflecting, from chaos to clarity. Better questions create better awareness. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? Ask, what is this revealing about me? Instead of, how can I fix this person? Ask, what am I being called to learn through this? These questions pull you out of the storm and back into your center. They remind you that not every problem needs immediate repair. Some situations exist to reshape you, not to be resolved on your timeline. Control comes from perspective, not pressure. The person who asks wise questions stays calm even in confusion because they understand that growth isn't about having all the answers. It's about asking with honesty and listening without defense. When you shift from fixing to understanding, you stop wasting energy on what you can't change and start investing in what you can. Your mindset, your reactions, your focus. Every time you try to fix something outside yourself, you risk losing balance within yourself. But when you begin asking questions that invite truth instead of comfort, peace begins to return. You realize that control was never about managing everything perfectly. It was about learning how to stay grounded when everything else moves. Asking better questions turns pain into purpose and chaos into clarity. It's not weakness to pause and reflect. It's strength, because anyone can react, but few have the courage to sit in silence and ask, what is this teaching me about who I am becoming? That's where control is rediscovered, not in fixing what broke, but in understanding why it mattered. The spirit of control feeds on fear. Faith breaks that cycle by reminding you that surrender is not weakness. Control is often a disguise for insecurity, a desperate attempt to predict the future because we don't trust ourselves to survive uncertainty. Fear tells you that if you don't manage every detail, everything will collapse. It whispers that surrender means losing power when in truth, it's the doorway to peace. The need to control is rooted in the illusion that outcomes define your safety, but real safety isn't found in perfection, it's found in trust. Fear builds walls, faith builds rest. When you start to let go, you're not giving up. You're giving in to something greater than your anxiety, something far wiser than your own plans. Fear keeps you busy but never fulfilled. It pushes you to overthink, overplan, and overanalyze, convincing you that if you could just hold everything together, you'd finally be okay. But that kind of control doesn't calm your mind. It drains your spirit. It separates you from flow, from peace, from divine timing. Faith, on the other hand, whispers something softer. You don't have to understand everything to trust that it's working for your good. Faith doesn't remove uncertainty, it redefines it. It transforms chaos into process, pain into purpose, and waiting into preparation. Surrender is not the act of abandoning responsibility. It's the act of aligning with reality. It's saying, I'll do what I can, and I'll trust what I can't. That's the balance most people miss. Fear tries to control both your effort and the outcome, while faith teaches you to release the outcome and focus on your integrity in the process. That shift changes everything. You stop panicking over timing, stop comparing your pace to others, stop forcing what's not flowing. You learn to move with purpose, but not with pressure. When you operate from faith, you stop needing to know every answer because you start believing that the right ones will come when you're ready. You begin to see surrender not as failure, but as confidence. Confidence that you are guided, protected, and supported even when life doesn't look perfect. That's when peace returns, quietly but powerfully, reminding you that control never kept you safe, trust did. Confidence is not domination, it's calm, grounded certainty in who you are and what's not your responsibility. Real confidence doesn't need to prove itself, it simply exists. It's quiet strength, not loud control. Most people confuse confidence with assertiveness or authority, but true confidence isn't about having the upper hand. It's about having inner peace. It's knowing you can stand still even when everything around you moves. The confident person doesn't demand to be heard. They speak with purpose. They don't need to win every argument because their worth isn't tied to being right. That's the kind of confidence that comes from alignment, not ego, from understanding your value instead of constantly defending it. When you lack confidence, you tend to overcompensate. You talk more, force more, and try harder to be seen or validated. You measure your worth through reactions and approval. But the moment you realize that nothing external can add or subtract from who you already are, control loses its grip on you. You stop chasing recognition and start walking in authenticity. Confidence allows you to detach from outcomes because you trust your effort and accept that not everything is meant to go your way. And that's okay. It frees you from the exhausting need to manage how others perceive you. True confidence isn't loud, it's stable. It's walking into a room and not needing to take up space because you already belong there. It's letting silence speak for you when words would only add noise. It's knowing when to act and when to wait, when to speak and when to let things unfold naturally. This kind of confidence grows when you stop fighting for control and start standing in truth. You no longer need to manipulate or dominate to feel powerful. You simply rest in who you are. And here's the deeper truth. Confidence and peace are inseparable. When you know who you are, you stop reacting to who others think you are. You stop explaining, proving, defending. You start radiating steadiness that no chaos can shake. Real confidence doesn't shout, it whispers through presence. It's the quiet assurance that says, I know what's mine, and I'm at peace with what's not. That's where your true power lives. In the calm certainty that you don't need control to feel complete, you cannot lead your emotions until you stop letting them lead you. Emotions are powerful. They're signals, not sentences. They're meant to inform you, not imprison you. But too often, people let emotions take the driver's seat, reacting to life in ways that create more chaos than clarity. You get angry and say words you can't take back. You feel fear and make decisions rooted in panic instead of purpose. You feel hurt and start building walls that keep love away. That's what happens when emotions lead. You move without direction, speak without reflection, and live without balance. Real maturity begins the moment you stop letting your feelings dictate your actions and start learning to understand them before you respond. Leading your emotions doesn't mean suppressing them. It means pausing long enough to ask, what is this emotion trying to show me? Anger might be revealing where your boundaries are being crossed. Fear might be pointing to where faith needs to grow. Sadness might be reminding you of something you value deeply. When you approach your emotions with curiosity instead of judgment, you start leading them with wisdom instead of reacting out of impulse. That's emotional intelligence, recognizing that you can feel deeply without being controlled by what you feel. When you let emotions lead unchecked, they distort your perspective. Everything feels urgent, personal, or final. But when you lead them, you step into awareness. You can say, I'm angry, but I'll speak when I'm calm. I'm afraid, but I'll move forward anyway. I'm hurt, but I'll choose forgiveness instead of resentment. That's not weakness, that's mastery. It's the discipline to acknowledge emotion without becoming it. You stop being a slave to your inner storms and start becoming the calm in your own chaos. Leadership over emotion is the foundation of peace, because life won't always give you calm circumstances, but you can always cultivate a calm spirit. When you learn to pause before reacting, to breathe before responding, and to think before deciding, you start living with power instead of pressure. Emotions will still visit, but they'll no longer dictate your direction. That's when you know you've grown. When you feel everything but you're ruled by nothing. Detachment is not walking away. It's standing firm in peace, even when chaos demands your reaction. It's the ability to stay present without being pulled into every storm that passes by. Most people mistake detachment for distance, but it's not about closing your heart. It's about guarding your energy. It's saying, I can be fully here, fully aware, fully compassionate, and still refuse to lose myself in the noise. Detachment doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you stop allowing those feelings to control your state of being. It's an inner posture, not an outer escape. A quiet strength that says, I don't need to match your chaos to understand my calm. When you practice detachment, you stop letting other people's moods, choices, or judgments dictate how you show up. You learn to see things as they are, not as your emotions paint them to be. That doesn't make you indifferent. It makes you wise. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not react. It's recognizing that your peace is too expensive to spend on things that won't matter in the long run. You begin to understand that detachment isn't about disconnecting from people, but about disconnecting from expectations, especially the ones that constantly disappoint you. True detachment gives you freedom. It frees you from needing validation, from chasing closure, from proving your worth in situations where silence already says enough. It's not the absence of care. It's the presence of control over your inner world. You realize that you can love deeply without clinging, that you can forgive without forgetting who you are, and that you can walk away from conflict without abandoning compassion. That's power, the kind that can't be taken, only surrendered by choice. There comes a point when you understand that reacting is optional. You stop explaining yourself to misunderstanding minds. You stop trying to convince people to see your heart. You stop allowing temporary emotions to decide permanent outcomes. Detachment teaches you that peace isn't found when life is perfect. It's found when you stop needing it to be. It's not about walking away from everything. It's about standing still inside yourself when everything around you tries to pull you apart. That's the quiet victory of detachment. Presence without pressure, love without loss, strength without struggle. Real power is the ability to pause when everything in you wants to prove, persuade, or panic. The pause is where wisdom lives. It's that sacred space between impulse and action, where emotion meets awareness and you decide what kind of person you're going to be. Most people lose control, not because of what happens to them, but because they respond too quickly, too emotionally, too loudly. The need to prove yourself drains your peace. The need to persuade everyone steals your clarity. The need to panic convinces you that you're powerless. But when you learn to pause, to take one breath, one heartbeat, one moment, you reclaim your power before it slips away. The pause is not weakness. It's mastery. It's choosing not to react from ego, but to respond from understanding. When you pause, you give yourself time to remember who you are. You remember that not everything deserves your energy, that silence can speak louder than explanation, that patience can protect what pride might destroy. The world teaches urgency, but wisdom teaches timing. A pause allows you to see what's real instead of reacting to what's temporary. You start realizing that not every fight is yours, not every comment deserves a response, and not every feeling requires expression. It takes strength to stop yourself mid-emotion and say, let me think. That's not hesitation, it's self-command. It's awareness that one wrong word can undo peace you've built for years. The pause gives space for grace, to choose kindness when anger feels easier, to choose peace when pride demands reaction. It turns chaos into clarity and reaction into reflection. The person who can pause before speaking, before acting, before deciding, that person has learned the secret of power that can't be shaken by circumstance. Every time you pause, you tell your mind, I am in charge here. You stop letting the moment define you and start defining the moment. The pause doesn't make life slower, it makes it clearer. It gives you the power to act with intention instead of instinct, with wisdom instead of fear. That's the kind of control no one can take from you, because true power doesn't come from dominating others. It comes from mastering yourself in the stillness before the next move. Life will never stop testing your peace, your patience, or your purpose. But that's not a reason to lose yourself. It's an invitation to find your strength. Every storm, every delay, every disappointment is not meant to destroy you. It's meant to refine you. You are not here to control the world. You're here to master your response to it. Control is never about bending life to your will. It's about standing unshaken in who you are, no matter what life brings. The moment you stop chasing control and start choosing calm, you become untouchable, not because the world stopped being chaotic, but because you stopped being moved by it. So take your power back, not by holding tighter, but by letting go of what was never yours. Breathe before you react, reflect before you speak, trust before you panic, and remember this: you are never powerless when you are peaceful. The calm within you is greater than the noise around you. Let that truth guide you, steady you, and remind you. Your control doesn't come from force, it comes from faith. And when you stand in that kind of peace, nothing and no one can take it from you.